I am going to invite my colleague Sarah to switch us to our mission and vision, and I'm going to invite the wonderful Eileen and Kate to read our mission and vision and values.
So this is Kate. I'll start with the mission. We mobilize our community to challenge systemic causes of homelessness and advocate for housing justice.
And I'll do the vision. This is Eileen. A region that acts on a shared sense of responsibility to ensure that everyone has a home.
We value equity, justice, and collective action.
Wonderful. Thank you both. I am going to hand it over to Allison here to, we want to really give a huge, big, public, wholehearted thank you to the two of you. So on that note, Allison, please take it away.
Great. Thank you very much. So I want to welcome you, Eileen Denham and Kate Speltz. I think that some people on this call know you very well from early morning and late night communications through the years, and some people may be scratching their heads and wondering, who are these people? Because often you are behind the scenes, and all the more reason that we want to just take a few minutes to recognize, appreciate, and thank you for the extraordinary work that you have quietly done for many years. I should know how many, but I don't know. I know it's more than 15. And maybe you'll enlighten us. But Kate and Eileen together have worked on what is known as our McKinney application, our Continuum of Cares application to the federal government for McKinney-Vento funding through HUD. Kate just tells me it's 20 years. See, this is typical. You ask a question and she gives you the answer in seconds. So the results of those applications are in part what we see each year in terms of the funding that is awarded to this community. But the results are cumulative and they build over time. They're incredibly significant. Tens of millions of dollars every year comes to our community to support homeless housing and programs. And it's a major undertaking to fill out this application. The questions are different every year. They are complex, they are detailed. There is a strict timeline, there are strict character limits, and there is a complicated process of figuring out how to maximize our community's scores, which sometimes involves hard decisions, which Eileen and Kate have to poke and prod certain people to make. Nevertheless, they are always cheerful. They have been incredible to work with. I know this from many, many sources. They're both morning larks, which is good. So they get to have early morning meetings with each other. But we also know that they work late nights and often on weekends. And our community rates high every year on our funding application. Some years high enough to be awarded millions of dollars in what are called bonus projects. And that is funding that has meant that it is possible to add hundreds more units of housing to our community over time than we would have gotten under normal circumstances. That is incredibly significant to hundreds of human beings, thousands probably over the years, and to our whole community. So I want to say how much we appreciate your hard and unsung and gracious work. The fact that you have listened to and kept community partners informed and involved, in part through your advisory committee over the years and answering questions, and the resources that you have helped to secure to house and support people in our community. State Representative Nicole Macri is joining us later, but she couldn't be here for this part of the meeting, but she sent me something that I'm just going to read to you. Kate and Eileen have been incredible champions working behind the scenes without fanfare to help our region respond to people who are unhoused with humane, respectful services and stable housing. Their efforts have helped ensure that the federal government remains a consistent partner in these vital efforts. Their smarts, compassion, and capacity for work are something I have long admired. I'm grateful I've gotten to work closely with them both over the years, and I thank them deeply for their public service and wish them both the best as they embark on new chapters in their lives. So we know that we are lucky that Kate is going to continue working at DCHS in a new role, and that Eileen is going to enjoy a fabulous retirement adventure. I want to pause for a moment and see if Maggie from HUD has been able to join. I'm not sure, but there are so many people on I can't see. So Maggie, please feel free to unmute yourself if you were able to join us this morning. And also Eileen and Kate, you know, I want to, I'm going to invite you to say something if you wish. You don't feel obliged, but I'm going to ask everybody to unmute and just say a big rousing thank you to you both. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Eileen.
Thank you. Oh, that's so nice. So Kate's usually the one who talks amongst us. She's the voice and I'm just the quiet person in the background. But this time I think I'll say something first and then let Kate follow. I just want to thank everybody for all of the many years that we have worked to put this application together. And I think Allison was trying to say in a very nice way, it's a team effort. We can't do this without all of you. And I think that jointly, we all have a lot to be proud of. I will toot our horn. We have ranked in the top. I think one year we were probably the highest ranking project. And I know we always rank very high, but all we're doing is reflecting what this continuum is doing. Some of our magic is just knowing how to portray that in a way that's going to really lift the whole continuum. And as Allison said, bring those federal dollars to our continuum. There was a point at which I probably could have told you how many new housing units we were a part of bringing to the continuum. We didn't do all that work. The housing developers and the agencies did that work, but we were able to add the COC dollars to the mix, and it's something I'm very proud of. So I just want to thank everybody. I will be going into retirement, so I will have a lot of memories to take with me. Thank you. So
And
Kate?
I couldn't have said it better myself. I will just say I will be looking for the chocolate.
Thank you.
It's coming.
Everybody.
It's coming. Wonderful. Well, we are so grateful to both of you for joining us this morning. It is better to be with you virtually than not at all, although we would like to be handing you big bouquets of flowers. So, you know, expect some deliveries. Thank you both so much. You're true public servants, and we are honored to be in partnership with you in this work. So thank you very much. And I think that we are now going to hear from Pat Simpson. And I can't see. There she is. Wonderful.
Yes.
So I want to just take a moment again to thank Pat Simpson for her extraordinary service. She is just concluding her term of service on the board of directors, her second term of service on the board of directors for the Coalition on Homelessness. But that is just a tiny fraction of the work that she has contributed to our community for decades. We deeply appreciate your quiet, powerful leadership in so many ways, Pat, including your participation in what you're about to share with us, but the ways to respectfully recognize and remember people who have lost their lives in this past year. So thank you for joining us, Pat. and I'll turn things over to you.
Thanks. This is just a quick invitation, and I think you have received a flyer in your meeting materials at some point for this. Next Tuesday, the winter solstice is, as it is every year, National Homeless Persons Memorial Day. And Women in Black and the Homeless Remembrance Project are organizing a ritual and an hour-long silent vigil. We are, for the second year, doing this at City Hall on the west side in front of the red doors. It will start at 4:21, which is sunset, the solstice moment, for the longest night. And we'll be reading, framed by a simple ritual, of about 170 names of those who have died outdoors by violence or in some public place during this last year. So you are very warmly invited to attend and be part of that ritual. And if you're able to stay from 5 to 6 for a candlelight silent vigil for that following hour. So hope to see some of you there. And if you can't come, do remember us at sunset. Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much, Pat. And for those who may not be aware, the solstice, of course, is the longest night of the year, and it is designated as National Homeless Persons Memorial Day. The Women in Black and the Homeless Leaves of Remembrance Project folks and Wheel have for many, many years organized these vigils, and their work is visible all year round in the beautiful leaves that are embedded in various places in our community. I do want to take a moment to just pause and note that this is the highest ever number of recorded deaths according to these criteria in 1 year in our community, and we're not at the end of December yet. Thank you so much, Pat. Thank you to all of your colleagues who make this respectful moment possible. And we know there are other remembrances and services throughout the community, so feel free to add details in the chat if you have them, or share them with us, and we'll pass the word on to people. So thank you very much. One thing that we didn't, I think, or maybe I missed it, but that we didn't note is our tradition in this meeting, since we have had to switch to being online, is to invite people, as you're comfortable doing, to turn your camera on if you are able to do so. We understand there are lots of reasons why people may not choose on any given day to do that, but we're trying to replicate some of the sense of community that we've so long enjoyed with coffee and treats and each other's company on our monthly membership meetings. So as you're comfortable, hi there, Erin. It's a lovely way for us to remember that we're not just, hi, Nigel, we're not just speaking to each other in, black boxes, but oh, lovely to see your faces, Kate and Peter. Thank you so much, everybody. Well, it is my enormous pleasure to give a brief rundown, highlights of the City of Seattle budget process. Obviously, this is something that deserves a lot more time than we're about to give it. But I want to be able to share some of the things that collectively we advocated for and secured in the budget, and to really give ourselves a sense, a supplemental budget year, which this is. Our city, our county, and our state work on a biennial budget process. That means 2-year budgets, which is which means that on the off years, like this year, on the odd years, generally speaking, not a lot happens, except we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we're in the middle of multiple intersecting crises. And I am glad to say that this year, a lot of significant things happened. Never enough in any 1 year, but a lot of significant movement. And we need to celebrate it, and we need to recognize that as I think most of you know, the work that we do collectively as a coalition happens over long expanses of time. And we like to celebrate and mark the pieces along the way, but we are also in this for the long haul. So I'm going to invite you to cast your memories back, if you remember this far back, to pre-COVID, when in 2019, we had the experience of working very hard together, primarily with Seattle City Council member Teresa Mosqueda, to pass what was the first in the nation legislation to adjust human services contracts for the city of Seattle to keep up with inflation. And we did it. And we knew that that was only a piece of what it was going to take to lift us up from years of inadequate funding and inadequate wages. But we were very proud of that accomplishment, and rightly so. However, inflation can be calculated in many different ways. And what we learned when the mayor's budget was sent to council earlier this fall is that, first of all, they made a slight error in the calculation. But second of all, the calculation based on that legislation resulted in a 3% cost of living adjustment. But inflation is more like 5.8, 5.9% right now in our community. So we worked very hard. Councilmember Mosqueda, Councilmember Herbold, and Councilmember Strauss quickly said, we are going to make this a priority and we are going to fix this to at least keep up with inflation. And so, although there apparently is a glitch that I just learned about this morning in a conversation before our meeting that we are going to work on, I'm really pleased to say that thanks to all of the hard work that you all did, there is some one-time recognition in the city budget that will give a total 5.8% one-time adjustment to human services contracts. And that includes the contracts that are going to the King County Regional Homelessness Authority from HSD. Is it enough? No, it's what we call necessary but not sufficient. But it's part of our collective work to demonstrate that when you refer to this as essential work and you contract government's responsibilities out to nonprofit organizations, you have to pay for what it costs to do the work and what it costs to pay the workers. And ultimately, we believe you need to pay for the value of the work. So we have a long way to go. There's a lot of conversation to be had, potentially even some opportunity, and we can talk with Representative Macri about this later on in this meeting, to take some action at the state level during the state legislative session. But I think you should all give yourselves a round of applause. This is a $5.3 million one-time adjustment on top of the 3% inflation adjustment. And we hope that we are setting a new floor and lifting it up as we go. So thank you to everyone who worked to make that possible. And also, remember when we helped to pass the Jumpstart Payroll Tax? It wasn't all that long ago, you guys. It was during the pandemic. The Jumpstart Payroll Tax, which is still the subject of a lawsuit, is the reason that our city budget was not a devastating series of cuts. Let's just remember, adding progressive revenue sources is the key to addressing the upside down way that we secure tax resources to do the work of government at every level of government, including the city of Seattle. So again, the Jumpstart Payroll Tax really allowed the mayor and the city council to do more. And that, coupled with the additional one-time funds that came in as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the federal response, together meant that we have seen actually a record-breaking series of investments in affordable housing in an off supplemental budget year. I always like to quote Dan Wise from Catholic Community Services. When I started my job 15 years ago, Dan Wise said to me, I have never met an elected official when we went to talk to them about the budget who told me this is a good budget year for your issue. Everything that we get added because of explaining the need and the urgency of the need to meet that need. So there's a historic $194 million investment in affordable housing in the city budget this year. $97 million of that comes from the Jumpstart Seattle Payroll Tax. We're really pleased to see some specific investments. I won't go into all the details because it really will take us too long, but among the things that the mayor and the city council did in the supplemental budget this year is to recognize that the emergency housing vouchers from HUD need to be accompanied by dollars to pay for the supportive services. And so there are millions of dollars in the budget for doing just that. Again, necessary but not sufficient. There is additional money to partner with King County to respond to the enormous unmet behavioral health needs of people, including people experiencing homelessness. There's more money for shelter, including hotel-based shelter, and other non-congregate shelter possibilities. And there is also a recognition that there is so much more that we need to do to respond, to keep people safe, and to respond to the public health crisis that is before us, as well as invest in the things that are not cheap, but that are lasting solutions to our intersecting crises. So we're really on a path, I think, towards getting more people to recognize that scaling up is the answer. We have, as everyone knows, a new incoming mayor of Seattle, Mayor-elect Bruce Harrell, a new incoming citywide city council member-elect Sarah Nelson. We also have a new King County council member-elect, Sarah Perry, on the east side. And those are just 3 high-level positions. There are new people elected in city councils all across King County, and we want to meet them, and we want you to meet them. So we're going to figure out a way early in the new year to do what we like to think of as a power mapping exercise. We hold quite a lot of power collectively, and we also want to figure out how you can be part of talking with the folks who are now holding elected office. So while the rest of this meeting is really squarely focused on our state legislative advocacy and who represents us, each of us and all of us in the state legislature, just remember we're working on multiple levels all at once. I also want to acknowledge and thank the folks who are here on behalf of our federal representatives. It's really an honor to have here staff representing Senator Patty Murray, Representative Pramila Jayapal, and I think I see that there might be somebody from Representative Adam Smith's office as well. So if you want to just very quickly take a moment to unmute yourselves or put your cameras on and let folks meet you, thank you so much for doing that. And I've perfectly timed it, I think, or you've perfectly timed it, Representative Macri. Thank you so much and welcome. I'm not going to introduce you. I think that pleasure goes to Sarah Robbins.
Hi, everybody. I get the exciting job of introducing someone who really, to this group, I don't think needs a lot of introduction. I think we all know Representative Macri as a champion of all of the issues that we care about: housing, homelessness, behavioral health infrastructure, public benefits. And so Representative Macri represents the 43rd district here in Seattle. She, on top of sort of those general topics, last session, the last couple of sessions, she's been a champion on tenant protections, including just cause, the right to counsel that is being established here in Washington State for eviction cases. We are the first state in the country to do that. And She is a master at finding dollars from lots of different places to fund all of the issues that we so deeply care about. So thank you for being here, Representative Macri, and we're excited to hear what some of your priorities and things that you're going to be working on this coming legislative session that's starting in less than a month. Welcome.
Thanks so much for that, Sarah. That is very, very generous. And it's just wonderful to be here. I always feel like I'm coming home whenever I come to the coalition meeting. And it's wonderful to see both so many familiar names and faces and also a lot of names and faces that I'm not familiar with, to just know that the work that you all are doing is growing and that so many folks are involved in it. I'm sorry I missed the earlier recognition for Eileen and Kate. I see their little boxes here on the Zoom and just want to personally express my deep, deep gratitude to them both for amazing careers helping us in this sector. I'm grateful to have had some late nights working alongside of them on some really important things. And I'm just very grateful to you both. So yeah, session is right around the corner and we are getting prepared for it. And so I'm glad to give some highlights about it. I'll start off with the big announcement that Governor Inslee made yesterday, that his budget, which will be released in full, I think later today, includes significant new investments in both capital, acquisition and construction, as well as operating dollars to respond to homelessness, to invest in more sustainable, affordable housing, and to respond to people experiencing behavioral health crisis. Altogether, it is just under $900 million in investments. This builds on over $2 billion that we included in the budget last year. We had a very significant year, thanks in large part to our congressional delegation and President Biden in getting significant COVID relief dollars that we were able to get out the door. In fact, Washington State was one of the states that pushed out the federal relief dollars quickest of all states, which was a priority for us, knowing that so many folks around our state were in such dire need. But the governor's proposal is, I think, an incredibly great starting point for our conversations this session about the increased investments we need to make. It doesn't take us all the way, but really, I think, underscores the urgency that is required to respond to the scale of the challenges that many of our neighbors across the state are experiencing. I do want to touch on some other policy conversations that have been happening and that we expect to see during this session. As Sarah mentioned, I've done a lot of work in recent years on tenant protections. I've really taken a housing justice perspective in my work because I think it is essential for us to understand and acknowledge that really the injustice in who gets access to housing, who gets kicked out of housing, has profoundly contributed to our homelessness challenge. This perspective has come after many, many years working on these issues. So many of you may know that in addition to my role in the legislature, I'm deputy director at DESC, the Downtown Emergency Service Center, and have worked for nearly 20 years on behalf and alongside people who have experienced long periods of homelessness and who are living with complex and often co-occurring disabilities. it also comes after many years working as an advocate and volunteer with the Coalition on Homelessness. In fact, I often credit my my work with the coalition as the reason why I ever even contemplated running for office. I was, just a lowly human service worker when folks at the coalition, other volunteers, coaxed me into going to my first city council meeting to testify for better responses to homelessness. And after that very intimidating first experience, I grew a lot of confidence in that work. And after a long time, found myself thinking that I could be an asset to my community at the state level. And so when I say it feels like coming home, that is in part why. I mean, I have deep roots with this coalition and I'm deeply grateful for the work that you do. But that work has led me to really work on what I think are upstream issues around housing justice and tenant protections. So we did do tremendous work, as Sarah mentioned, and the governor was a key partner to us in maintaining an eviction moratorium, including a freeze on rent increases through many months of the pandemic. And when that statewide moratorium ended, since that time, we've seen exorbitant increases in rent. Definitely here in the King County region, I've heard many stories of rent increases 20%, 30%, 50%. In areas outside of King County, however, I've heard of rent increases 60%, in Spokane of rents doubling, 100% increases. We have zero protections in the law against such rent gouging. So I am bringing back a bill that I had introduced a couple of years ago to limit rent increases over time. I thought that bill was important because we had been seeing double-digit rent increases in the King County area, particularly over the last 5 to 8 years. But now it is clear that this is a statewide issue that is having profoundly harmful effects on folks. So the protections that we put in place last year, just cause eviction protections, and our eviction prevention project that diverts people away from eviction court, is significantly weakened by the ability to gouge people in rent and essentially allow for economic evictions that avoid the legal process. So I'll be working on that policy. We'll also be working in tandem on a policy that addresses land use issues so we can build housing supply, because we know that exclusionary zoning has been one contributor to why we haven't seen more housing production regionally, and that housing supply has been limited to some more urbanized areas of our county and of our state. And we know that these sorts of policies, an anti-displacement strategy like preventing rent gouging, and policies that allow us to expand the diversity of housing, the supply of housing, have to go hand in hand. I always say we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and that's what we intend to do this session. We're going to put more money into housing, and we're going to set the right policy to make sure that we create more housing, that people are protected in the housing that they have. In addition to that, I have been working really closely with my seatmate, former Speaker of the House, Representative Chop, on a really, I think, forward-looking vision for how we create more opportunities for people with complex medical conditions and disabilities to gain access to housing. So building on the work that many of us had done over the years to create a entitlement benefit for folks to receive the right kind of tenancy support services, in housing through this, what's often called the Foundational Community Supports Medicaid benefit, building on that to say, you know what we actually need is for people to have real housing to move into. And so Representative Chop has been working on a proposal over the last year to connect that idea of actual real housing to the concept of services to create a program that he's calling the Apple Health and Homes program. And so that is an exciting project as well. In the House, I sit on the Appropriations Committee. I'm actually a vice chair of the Appropriations Committee. We're the group that works on the state operating budget. And so I will be working most significantly on those budget investments. And I'm really grateful to some of the providers here and others around the state who met with me yesterday to talk about the challenges we're seeing in attracting and retaining workers to this sector. People are understandably and legitimately burnt out. And this is a sector that has seen a significant underinvestment over many, many years, and the stress of the pandemic and the real stress of the workload has been apparent. We know that morale is low in a lot of places. People are wearing multiple hats within their organizations to keep the lights on and to keep the people that you're serving safe and getting just the basic survival services, much less the services that help people gain greater stability. And so we'll be working on a budget proviso around workforce support and trying to at least start the conversation about how the state can be a better partner in investing in this sector. And so that is a passion of mine I've worked on for a number of years, but we are really hurting right now. And I want folks to know that I'll be sort of rallying around that work. I always say, like, we can't do our work if we don't have our team. And right now our team is really hurting. And so that is going to be something that I'll be lifting up significantly. I do want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A. And I know you have a very full agenda. So I will turn it back over to you, Sarah. If folks have questions, I'm glad to take them.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Does anyone have questions for Representative Macri? You can either unmute yourself and ask or pop it in the chat.
Mike D, Lake Forest Park Citizens Commission. What can we do to help? Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. I love that question. You're not a plant, I'll say that, but I appreciate it. Citizen engagement in the legislative process is essential. I will say specifically on the workforce front that state policymakers are not as aware of the challenges that nonprofit organizations in the homeless response sector are experiencing, in part just because of how these services are structured. So the state has a pretty involved role in, for instance, the healthcare sector. So as we've all been seeing in the news, challenges with hospital nursing staff and with our nursing home and assisted living staff shortages. The state policymakers are pretty plugged into that because the state has a very significant role in regulating and overseeing those healthcare delivery systems. The state has more of an arm's length relationship with the homeless response system. You know, it's not licensed in the same way, and the state, you know, pretty much provides dollars through grants, but doesn't have the same sort of regulatory oversight in the homeless service sector. So a lot of education is needed. So reaching out to your legislators to make sure that they understand what day-to-day looks like, both from the perspective of service providers as well as people seeking services, and just the stresses of getting adequate services or getting them quick enough, I think is something we need folks to understand. We need policymakers to also understand that this is skilled work, that it requires not only training, but it requires expertise that often is only garnered through experience of doing it. And that seeing a lot of turnover in this field hurts all of us. It hurts first and foremost the people seeking services, but hurts our broader communities when we are not well positioned to provide services. These are complex systems, and we have so many folks trying to help people in need sort of navigate these complexities. And when we are constantly training new folks, it makes it really difficult. So I think sharing some of that information with policymakers is important. Talking about the urgency of making investments. This is the #1 issue of concern for residents across the state of Washington. There has been recent polling done that shows that above all other issues, people are most concerned about homelessness. This is a turnaround from even just a couple of years ago, and that the legislature has an obligation to put more attention on this issue in this legislative session. So Allison and Sarah and others can share with you kind of all the ins and outs of how to do effective advocacy. But I'll tell you, like, our virtual doors are being knocked on by all sorts of interests all the time. So you cannot communicate frequently enough to your legislators about your issues. Don't ever think that you're pestering us, because I think these issues get really, we don't hear about them as much as you think that we do. And so I would encourage you to reach out, not just once or twice, but pretty consistently. We have a 60-day session, so that's, 8 or 9 weeks long. And I would set a goal to try to just continue to reach out to your legislator maybe once a week during the session, so that these issues stay front of mind for all of us.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. We have a question in the chat. Thank you for your leadership, Rep. Macri. Will the legislation addressing exclusionary zoning and increasing housing supply have requirements to ensure new units are affordable?
Yeah, no, the policy itself, again, as I said, that we need a menu of policies to address this. There's been a lot of conversation about how you craft supply side policy in a way that really drives affordability. It's very difficult to do in a single policy that's only about land use. Unfortunately, it is this delicate balance of how you drive affordability. You probably saw in the Seattle Times, there's some controversy around how the Seattle inclusionary zoning program is working, and whether or not there have been some unintended consequences of it. And I don't have an opinion on that. I haven't studied it well enough to say, but we have been talking about how do we put together all the right things, and the right ingredients tend to be those protections like protections against rent gouging, investments in things like subsidies that you can that can be resident specific, so like tenant-based subsidies to help buy down the cost of rents until you get the supply that sort of evens out the housing costs. But there won't be a sort of built-in affordability inclusionary zoning piece to this. It's really aimed at opening up what they call soft density. So things like backyard cottages that add more housing diversity and make a neighborhood that maybe has like a typical Seattle neighborhood would have single family houses that are priced at $800,000 or above. Get it sort of sprinkled in with some backyard cottages that maybe can be available for rent for $1,200, $1,500 a month. We have a long way to go to get to a vision like that, but that is the idea of how that policy would be one piece of the puzzle.
Great,
Oh,
thank you.
yeah, Nick. Nicholas, thank you for your question here about is the state considering raising ABD cash stipends? It's currently at 197. So DSHS did have a proposal to increase the ABD cash grant. I'm hoping that we'll see that in the governor's budget. I haven't received confirmation on that. If it's in the governor's budget, it will be incredibly helpful to start the conversation. If it's not in the governor's budget, it will be essential for advocates to come out strongly in advocating for an increase to ABD. For those who don't know what that is, that's the age blind and disabled benefit for folks who are likely to qualify for SSI but have not yet qualified for it. And obviously nobody can live on $197 a week, much less a month.
Great, thank you. I think we'll hear a little bit more on that topic in our agenda today from Poverty Action. It looks like Peter Shapiro has a question.
Hello. Yes, you make it so easy for me, Representative Macri. I am delighted that you are my representative, along with Representative Chop and our great senator as well. But that hasn't stopped me from talking. It's been thrilling recently, I mean, this within the last year or two, to see so much recognition that permanent supportive housing is the best and only real solution to chronic homelessness, the folks who are on the street. It's the antidote and the necessary replacement for the cynical, quote, Compassion Seattle approach that unfortunately it looks like our mayor-elect in Seattle is adopting. Are there any additional steps that are being considered in this legislative session to continue that robust development and attention to having more permanent supportive housing, including necessary services that go along with capital investments?
Yeah, thank you for that. I wholeheartedly agree with your position, which Peter already knows. Yes, so the governor's proposal has dollars both on the capital and the operating side. I need to dig into the details of what sources they're proposing there, but there is an acknowledgement from the executive branch that permanent supportive housing is the thing that we need to do. I am working on a policy that is a relatively small policy, but to me seems significant, particularly to your point about the sustaining investment in operating supportive housing. It's easier to get capital dollars, but how do we keep these programs that in the long run actually save government a ton of money, because it is incredibly, well, inhumane for people to be homeless, but it's also very expensive on public systems to be homeless. And so the bill that I'm doing is small, but I'm hoping will have some significant impact. It is to establish an advisory committee on permanent supportive housing investments. So that way the state can be hearing from a variety of expertise. I'm biased. In King County, we have a lot of expertise on how to build effective permanent supportive housing programs, both from the provider community as well as the local government community, as well as seasoned researchers at University of Washington and otherwise. And so trying to pull together that. Also, the state has an advisory board that informs our housing trust fund policies, and including sort of how those capital investments in building housing integrate with sort of the ongoing sustainability of those programs. We don't have a seat at the table for a permanent supportive housing expert on that housing trust fund advisory committee, even though more and more of our housing trust fund dollars are going to build permanent supportive housing. So I'll have a bill that asks for that. Now, these sort of like government work group advisory committees often they're not super exciting policies, but they're fundamental to how decisions get made about investments. So I'll be working on that.
Wonderful, thank you. I mean, we're joking about Peter being a plant and Nicholas being a plant, but really nobody's a plant. This is what this coalition is. And you've got folks here who understand the issues from personal experience and perspective. who have helped to change the law in some cases, and people who are lifetime advocates. And Representative Macri, thank you so much for your taking so much time to join us this morning, knowing that you are doing probably 3 full-time jobs at this particular moment. But also thank you for your incredible work and dedication and understanding that we can and have to walk and chew gum at the same time, and that changing policies without paying attention to the implementation of those policies is just not an option. I want to just take one quick moment, if I may, because I've been thinking a lot about the fact that we are all in this for the long haul, or if not, we will be. And to ask if you would just briefly speak to a proviso that you worked with me on last session that our members know a little bit about, and that is related to the nature of this work and the need for folks to have appropriate compensation and support in this work, in recognition of the fact that it is work that involves trauma, and that's primary as well as secondary trauma. And I do think some of the primary trauma that folks experience in doing this work is embedded in the inadequacies of our structural responses to homelessness, because having to repeatedly fail to meet people's basic needs is a terrible, terrible experience and weighs on people's hearts and souls and bodies. But I'm hoping that we'll have the Department of Commerce, Kathy Kennard, joining us in January to talk about the results of the RFP. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the proviso and how it relates to what we might be able to work with you on this year.
Yeah, thank you. And Allison, thanks to you and your organizing work to help us get that proviso in the budget and passed last year. So the Department of Commerce has been, they put out a request for proposals to seek a convener, a facilitator to have this conversation about the impacts of, we included both primary and secondary trauma. You know, for many, many decades, we've been talking about the impacts of secondary trauma in this work. It's become clearer that is not just helping people who've experienced trauma navigate through the system, but that workers themselves are continually put into traumatic environments and are continually dealing with traumatic events themselves. And I can tell you from my work at DESC that we have seen more and more people in behavioral health crisis. We've had an increase in the number of clients who have died during the pandemic, and staff are there responding every single day to these incidents. And we know, of course, of our colleagues who have personally experienced violence in their work, physical violence in their work, and this has a long-lasting effect on people's health and well-being. So, and again, I'll go back to what I said before. All of this is mostly invisible to state policymakers. So part of our intent is definitely to provide some resource and dedicated space for the state to engage with providers around real solution-oriented ideas for how we address the realities of this work, but also to lift up and educate policymakers about what it takes to do this work, and to acknowledge that we have not provided the level of support that we should, and to engage the state on how we can be better partners on it. So I'm really grateful. I was really struck with some of the horrific incidents that we have seen during the pandemic, and that prompted a conversation between me and the coalition and other providers in the King County region. And so I'm really grateful. And I do think it's like the first step and has actually helped our thinking about this workforce support proviso that we're talking about for the 22 session. So thank you. And thanks for all your leadership. And I know you've had many, many conversations, Allison, with Commerce to make sure that this proviso stays on track. So I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you so much. And we're grateful to you. It is an extraordinary marker of where we are, that we can have somebody with the deep level of knowledge and experience in the position that you're in. And I think it really helps all of us to remember that our government elected officials are real people. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We know that you are back to back to back. And we have some other wonderful people to share exciting legislative priorities with us. I will, just before we let you go, Representative Macri, thank you in advance for your help on the coalition's first ever legislation, which we'll be talking about. Sarah and Melanie will be talking about later on today, and you've already been helpful as we've thought about it, and we're excited to work with you as we bring that forward. So.
Yeah, thank you for bringing these issues to light. And yeah, I'll be there fighting alongside you on that one that I know you'll talk about in a little bit. Yeah, thank you all. I want to encourage everyone in the end of the year. I know it's super busy time in a lot of housing and homelessness services organizations, but to the extent you can, please get a little bit of downtime and some rest, time with family or other loved ones. I'm just really, really grateful for all of you. And I look forward to hearing from many of you as we head into the legislative session in early January. Thanks so much.
Okay, we are going to move into our next section, which will surely be just as exciting and chock full of amazing advocacy opportunities. We've got the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, we've got the Statewide Poverty Action Network, and the Washington Coalition for Homeless Youth Advocacy here to share with us some of their select priorities that they are focused on. I'm going to ask if Poe from Washington Low Income Housing Alliance has joined us at this time. And come off mute and let us know you're here if you're here. Otherwise, we might go ahead and start with Statewide Poverty Action Network. So not hearing or seeing Poe, so I might invite us to start with Statewide Poverty Action Network. But Allison, I think it might be nice if you want to like cue this up and give us a little bit of context, and then we'll jump on in with Statewide Poverty Action Network.
Okie doke. Thank you. Maybe somebody could just check in with Poe. I'm just checked my email, and I'm so sorry to say that I think there are some people who aren't getting the responding email when you register and who aren't getting our Zoom link. And we think it may be because some government email systems are filtering out that autoresponder. So I deeply apologize. We will fix that. And maybe Sarah or Jody, you could just check in and give Poe the direct link if they need it. Technical difficulties abound, but we prevail nevertheless. So thank you so much. I see Omar Cuevas Vega here from Poverty Action. And we have had the pleasure of hearing from Omar a number of times. We are so grateful to the folks who are part of these statewide organizations that lead on housing, homelessness, public benefits issues. It's really through our partnerships at multiple levels that we get to be effective. Poverty Action is a long time partner of ours, and we've learned so much from the way in which you do your work. And we know that the public benefits system, like many other systems, has been inadequately funded, and there's an awful lot of catching up to do. During the Great Recession, it's very simple. The governor and the legislature balanced the budget on the backs of poor people, and we are not yet back from that. and it wasn't that great to begin with. So we're really grateful. We know that what Omar is going to share and what Liz from Watcha and Poe from the Housing Alliance are going to share is only the tip of the iceberg. I have been using this metaphor. Consider these appetizers, right? The full meal is yet to come, and that's why we are telling you all, we ask for your home address when you register, and we ask you to look up what district you're in, because we together collectively take action and mobilize, and sometimes it really helps to know who's in which district. But all of these organizations work on many, many issues. We will provide you the links to their full legislative priority lists and one-pagers as they develop them. But we're just asking folks to take a few minutes to share a few highlights. And of course, we'll have some time for questions, but you're not going to get it all right now. So just relax and think about what are the key things. I mean, just the fact that we had Representative Macri here for half an hour is already enough, I think, to give you a sense of how many important and exciting issues she and her colleagues are working on. But here are the advocacy partners who are here to tell us more. And of course, we thank them all. And Leanna, I see that you've joined us also. So I'm not sure, Leanna or Omar, who's going to start, but we will invite you to take your 3 to 5 minutes. And I think what we'll do is we'll ask each organization to share highlights, select priorities, and then we'll have questions for all of you. And we'll help to facilitate in the chat. So over to you.
All right. Hi, everybody. I guess I'll kick us off. I'm Leanna Crescent, she, her from Poverty Action. Thank you so much for that intro, Alice. And gosh, ownership and gosh, so many rock stars on this call, just looking at all these names. So just glad to be here. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about what we're hoping to work on this session. I'm going to highlight 2 things. One you've already heard about, had a little teaser already about ABD. We're going to be supporting a cash grant increase there. As you know, it's way, way too low, $197, and we're hoping to kick it up to at least $417, which still, frankly, is not enough, but it is better. So I'm hoping to support that. The second one that I'm going to be focusing most on is a change to the Tanf program. So Tanf is a cash grant program that helps low-income families. And like Allison talked about, during the recession, there was a lot of policies put into place to save money that were really punitive. And one thing that we saw is they changed the way that folks can access help after the 60-month federal limit, and they made it into these really narrow categories instead of this broad hardship exemption. And the result of that were really racist outcomes that cut off Black and Indigenous families at higher rates than the rate of the population. And during COVID, they went back to the broad hardship exemption, which had really great equitable outcomes, but that's set to end in June. And so our ask is that they would go back to those broad exemptions so that people who still need help after the arbitrary 60-month limit are able to access it. And that would be both for whole family caseloads and then child-only caseloads. Because believe it or not, even if you're just a child on TANF, there's still a 60-month limit, and that started in 2011. So yes, that's nonsense. So we're hoping to go back to the broad exemptions for both. Okay, I'm trying to keep it super brief, and so I'm going to kick it over to Omar. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Omar Cuevas Vega. I'm the Policy and Field Coordinator for Statewide Poverty Action Network, and my pronouns are he and they. I believe this is my 4th legislative preview with the coalition, so always excited to come back and present on Poverty Action's priorities. I did drop a link into the chat, which has a list of all our priorities for 2022, so feel free to check it out. Our full policy agenda is still being fine-tuned, so we're hoping to have it ready at the start of the new year, if not earlier. So I'll be speaking on our access to dental care campaign, specifically on expanding dental therapy. So dental therapy is, or a dental therapist, I should say, is a mid-level provider within the dental care team. So think of them as the nurse practitioner or physician assistant on a dental team. And so we've been working on this one for a couple of years, and we're pretty excited for this year. So in the 2021 legislative session, we were able to secure funding from the legislature to establish a task force to look at the current model, which exists only on tribal lands, and identify ways to expand it statewide. As it currently stands, it definitely excludes pretty much all of Washington, but including urban natives who are not living on a reservation or on a tribal nation. So we're hoping that the findings from the task force that just concluded in November, of which we were a task force member, or rather, Marcy Bowers, our executive director, was a member on that task force. So we're pretty excited for that. We had a bill this past session, but this year, or rather for 2022, we'll be reintroducing a new bill to reflect some of the findings, which we're pretty excited about. Some more details to come in the next couple of weeks as we're finalizing that bill, but we're pretty excited for that. And then lastly, I do want to invite folks. Registration for our upcoming lobby day has opened, and if any folks on the call are interested in participating, I know that there's many folks from the coalition staff who have attended and can probably speak to their experiences of our annual lobby day. Again, it will be virtual. We would love to have you join. It's a pretty fun event, so hopefully you can join us. So thank you so much for letting me be here, and happy to answer any questions.
Great. Does anybody have any questions for Leanna or Omar on ABD, Tanf, or dental therapy?
Sorry, I didn't see the list, but was there something about housing and essential needs? Thank you.
I think that we're going to be generally supporting things this year, but that we don't have a specific piece of legislation or proviso that we're working on right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question again on this theme of, being aware that sometimes it takes a long time to make things change in the way that they ought to. Why is it so hard to get this dental therapy bill passed? It is painful to contemplate.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue in the sense that we have one major opponent who is the professional association representing dentists. They're a pretty powerful arm who have blocked the legislation for a number of years for a variety of reasons. And I think that they've done a pretty good misinformation campaign over the last decade. And, as I mentioned, we had the task force, which really brought them to the table, which wasn't something that we were able to do over the past decade, is really bring them to the table and have a open and honest conversation. All the meetings were public, and so folks were able to really see what was the reasoning. And part of it is, I would say, it's a monetary issue, and then part of it is just sort of folks feeling an infringement on their profession. So I know that there was a similar fight when physician's assistants were trying to be recognized as a profession. There was pushback from doctors, or rather professional associations representing doctors, and now a lot of doctors really rely on those physician assistants or nurse practitioners. They're just an integral part of the team. So it's just, I would say part of it is fear of the unknown is also a part of that.
Thank you.
It does look like there's just a couple comments in the chat. Nigel saying this bill has been introduced for the last 9 years, maybe more, that we've been working on this. And just lots of money being invested against this nationally. So I don't know if there's comments on that.
Well, and I thank you so much, Chris Stearns. We're so grateful to have you with us, a member of the Auburn City Council and a longtime advocate for all kinds of basic human rights, civil rights. and protector of the rights of people experiencing homelessness, even when the majority of the rest of the Auburn City Council didn't join him. But thank you very much, Councilmember Stearns, for sharing that very powerful op-ed. I do think this is a situation, I will just share personally, you know, the state senator who represents me has heard from me frequently on this particular bill, because while we agree on many issues, this is one on which my state senator's vote has not pleased me. And so I just continue politely sharing the reasons why I think this makes excellent sense and is really a matter of justice for kids and Native people and people who are trying to get dental care on low incomes. So I thank you for sticking with this for so long. I think I've lost track, but I think I'm probably supposed to be helping to move us through this. So I see that we have Liz Troutman and Joe, and I'm not remembering, Joe, your last name, Bechtold, thank you, here from WACHA. Thank you so much for joining us. Please keep putting your questions for Leanna and Omar around their issues in the chat, but we'll turn things over to our colleagues focusing on homeless youth and young adults, and give you a few minutes to share some highlights and field some questions. And we'll hope that our friend Poe from the Housing Alliance joins us in a few moments.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Liz Troutman. I use she, her pronouns, and I chair the Washington Coalition for Homeless Youth Advocacy. Joe, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Thanks, Liz. Hi, all. My name is Joe Bechtold. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the public policy coordinator at the Mockingbird Society.
Thanks, Joe. And Mockingbird convenes the coalition, and Joe provides amazing support to the coalition. So I'm very glad that you're here today. We, as many coalitions, are still finalizing all of the details of our legislative agenda, but excited to share a few priorities with you here today. As a reminder, we're a statewide coalition made up of advocates, funders, service providers, young people who care about ending youth and young adult homelessness. So really excited to be here and see also many WACHA members on the call today. The couple, three priorities I wanted to share. The first is related to healthcare access for unaccompanied homeless minors. Folks here may know that if you are under the age of 18, you need parental consent to access routine medical care. You don't need it for behavioral health care if you're over the age of 13, and you don't need it for sexual and reproductive health care, but you do need it for routine doctor's visits, immunizations, et cetera. This is a particular challenge during the time of COVID. If you do not have a parent or guardian who is available to accompany you to provide that consent. There are a few exceptions, in one in state law, which allows McKinney-Vento staff, school nurses, and school counselors to provide consent. The gaps there include when school buildings are closed, as they were for a good portion of last year. During summer breaks when they are closed, there are gaps in access, and not every minor experiencing homelessness is enrolled in school. So that is one pathway to access, but not adequate to meet the needs of all young people. The second path that currently exists is something called the mature minor doctrine. I would say that medical providers in Seattle and King County generally are pretty familiar with this doctrine, which allows a medical provider to make a determination that somebody is mature enough to consent to healthcare. While providers in the Seattle King County region might be familiar with it, statewide, there are a lot of providers who are not comfortable with it or do not know it. And some hospital associations and medical, sort of larger medical practices just have sort of general liability concerns and just are like, as a blanket rule, we're not touching that. I will also add that anytime you have individual medical providers making a determination about whether somebody qualifies for something based on how they present, that raises a lot of very concerning aspects around equity and access, particularly for Black, Indigenous, and other youth of color who are overrepresented among young people experiencing homelessness, as well as LGBTQ and particularly gender nonconforming young people. So this is a real equity and access issue that, again, has been exacerbated during the COVID pandemic, when we've seen young people have difficulty accessing vaccines or even COVID testing when they were symptomatic. So the solution is to pass legislation at the state level that would allow unaccompanied homeless minors to consent directly for that medical care. So that is what we're working on. We have Representative Cody and Senator Kaiser, who are both championing this issue, and really excited to carry this forward. WACHA is partnering with Building Changes, who has been doing tremendous advocacy and organizing around this issue for a long time. So excited about that. A couple of our budget priorities. One is related to behavioral health access in youth shelters, expanding an existing proviso for that. And I'm excited to continue to expand, again, those behavioral health supports in shelters. I think we've talked a lot about the needs in shelter environments. And again, for young people, particularly minors who might be arriving in crisis, having that on-site crisis stabilization, access to behavioral health supports without a diagnosis is really, really critical as a low barrier way to kind of get immediate behavioral health supports and then figure out if there is a longer term step. So that's a request of $1.2 million to expand that funding statewide. And then lastly, excited about the governor's budget and have some additions to the governor's budget in the area of preventing exits from state systems of care into homelessness, and really ensuring that young people are exiting foster care, juvenile rehabilitation, inpatient treatment into safe and stable housing. So we'll be working on those issues as well. I see a question in the chat about parents who won't consent to vaccines. Our legislation will not address that issue. That is a big issue. I think personally, I would say that I think that minors should get to consent to their health care generally. I think there are some significant political challenges with that conversation. And so this bill is really narrowly focused on young people who do not have a parent or guardian who is able to consent, and providing that immediate barrier. Legislation that would override parental consent, I think is politically really challenging right now, but also say that, yeah, so I'll stop there. Happy to talk more about that.
It's open for more questions.
Yeah, please, if there's time. I'll look to Allison or Jody to tell us if there's not.
Yeah, I think we're doing good.
Great, thank you. Mike D with the Lake Forest Park Citizens Commission. Is there anything to zero homelessness, the students experiencing homelessness in the schools, public schools? Thank you.
Yeah, so there is also a proposal. This is something that we're supporting at WACHA. Thank you for raising it. Homeless Student Stability Program, which some folks may know. It is a grant program that is split between the Department of Commerce and the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. Building Changes is the lead on that. So if there's anyone there here from there, please jump in. But they have a request to strengthen the underlying legislation for that program to make it easier for the commerce grants and the OSPI grants to actually work together in partnership, which I think was the original conception of the program, but hasn't always been how it's worked in practice, as well as to strengthen the ways that the programs serve unaccompanied homeless students. And then there's a small budget request this year of $450,000 to continue to expand technical assistance and explore some innovations that the grant programs could pursue. And then my understanding is that really sets up a conversation for 23-25 for next biennium about a more significant investment, but wanting to address some of those technical changes this session.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. And Joe, is there anything that you would like to add, or anything that either one of you might want to share in terms of people who might want to get more involved in participating in WACHA? Or thoughts that you might want to share? We're going to have a little bit of conversation later on about how to make sure that people are engaging the folks they work with, especially young people, in doing some of this important advocacy and sharing appropriately and respectfully their own experiences to help change policies.
Joe, do you want to talk about how to get involved with the coalition?
Sure. I was just going to say, if folks want to send me an email, I'll put my email in the chat and we can add you to the calendar invite. And we meet once a month between 3 and 4:30 normally.
Thank you so much. There's so much in motion and so much good work. It is challenging to keep up with it, but we really deeply appreciate the collaborative spirit with which we're in each other's spaces and sharing highlights. And we know that you'll send us action alert links, and we will do the same. And together we're gonna, bring some weight to these issues. Thank you so very much, Joe and Liz. Thank you for convening a group that really focuses on some of the very thorny, complicated issues that make it very difficult for young people to just get their own basic needs met as they are experiencing instability and homelessness. And we really are excited now to welcome Po Leopai. Po just joined us, I think. There he is. Hello. With the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, also sometimes known as WLIHA inelegantly. Po, since you are relatively new, I think, in your role at the Housing Alliance, and this is probably your first meeting with the Coalition on Homelessness, I want to invite you to introduce yourself and then share maybe just 3 to 5 minutes. We know the Housing Alliance agenda is long, appropriately so. So just a couple of highlights. We're describing this as the appetizer, and the full course meal will be unfolding in the course of our advocacy together over the 60-day session. So welcome, and I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Allison, and good morning, everyone. Good to see you. I wrote something up for y'all. I hope you just give me a few minutes and I'll go ahead and get right to it. My name is Po, pronouns he, him, and I'm the new advocacy organizer with the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. I am also an impacted community member. In most households, this conversation has taken place and continues to take place. The conversation around affordable housing and homelessness, where folks living in tents and cars are often viewed as a nuisance and as an inconvenience by those who consider themselves above that reality. In these same cities, renters struggling to make ends meet have to also make critical decisions when faced with sudden rent increases, like, do I pay for daycare or do I buy groceries? On many occasions, these marginalized families are eventually pushed into homelessness without essential services and resources to help them get back on their feet and to thrive. We are at a turning point, though, where this reality has become too massive to ignore. It is time. The Housing Alliance for years now have been champions and advocating for those experiencing homelessness and those seeking a safe and an affordable place to live. With that said, more and more people are waking up to this truth that housing is a human right and that no ask is too large. Next month, we are entering Washington's 2022 legislative session with much ambition and optimism. We are asking lawmakers to support a bold budget ask of $400 million new dollars in affordable housing, and this is doable. There is a $5.5 billion amount of money between surplus funds and federal COVID funds that are unspent that legislature technically has to work with. Some lawmakers may need to be convinced to spend this money and not save it. So it is our jobs overall with any budget ask this session would be to overcome any hesitation to spend the money. In addition, the passage of the Housing Justice Act will prevent landlords from denying housing solely based on a tenant or family member's previous arrest or incarceration. This is hope to BIPOC folks who have fallen victim to racial disparities within our justice system. I believe in the power of the word. During the last session, my testimony from my own lived experience had a hand in the passage of our new police reform bills. It was historic and rightfully fueled by the testimonies from families who have had direct impact, that have been directly impacted by police violence. My cousin was killed by a Seattle police officer. I look forward to getting to know you all more and more. This ambitious agenda is possible with your help, and I'm looking forward to uniting with everyone in this movement. And thank you all for this time. And I'm gonna leave my email in the chat, and I hope you guys reach out. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of y'all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Poe. You believe in the power of the word, and you use the word powerfully. We're really grateful to get to know you and to work with you. I wonder if you could just briefly explain to folks who might not be familiar with it what the Housing Justice Act is.
The Housing Justice Act is dear to my heart. You know, folks that have any prior incarceration, any type of criminal background is denied. That's all they need to, you know, to be in front of them with these folks, to deny people from housing. And you know, I have a record myself. My DOC number is 856541. I did time in Monroe for a crime I did when I was 19. I was real young, you know, and there's the gang world, the street life, you know, but now you see me now, you know, and I hope this is a testimony that when people are given a chance, given the right resources, given housing and opportunity, they can make a turnaround. And I commend and admire everyone here that's pushing for this. It's dear to my heart because of that. You know, we all deserve a chance, and I'm proof that when you're given a chance, you know, through my lived experience, I'm here now with you all. And because of folks y'all like you all, I am here. So.
Well, thank you so much, Poe. And I see Shelley Drake from What's Next Washington is active, cheering you on in the chat. And I really want to recognize and thank you all. You know, one of the things that the coalition has been involved in for a number of years is the work to restore voting rights and to improve access to the vote for people experiencing homelessness. And of course, we know there is a huge intersection with people who have been incarcerated, and the leadership of folks like Shelley and other directly affected people in the work to restore the right to vote to some 20,000 Washington residents starting January 1st. Is one of the incredible, inspiring bright spots and a real example of the advocacy led by people who are affected by these systems that are either broken or functioning as they're intended to, depending on your perspective, perhaps some of each. So we're really hopeful that in addition to the legislative work, we can maybe work with you, Poe, and others, and Shelley, to really amp up the voter registration and voter engagement work that we're going to be able to do together in January. I also want to recognize Pioneer Human Services as a strong partner and convener and an entity that has really led on the Housing Justice Act work for many years. So I think we'll be hearing more about this really important issue in the weeks to come. And thank you so much. We know that the Housing Alliance, which is our lead statewide agency on housing and homelessness issues, is working nonstop. And as soon as there is a one-page list of priorities, we will share that with everybody. But this is why we're asking you to tell us what your legislative district is, and why we ask you to give us your home address when you register for our meetings, because January 10th is the first day of the legislative session, and we are going to hit the ground running. That's why we do this in December, because it is we're already in it by the time our January meeting comes. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I hope you will all help us think about what are the ways that you can engage the folks whom you are working with, your residents, clients, guests, people to do their own advocacy. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But now I am just so excited and really, I have to say, moved to invite Sarah Robbins and Melanie Smith. Melanie is our contract lobbyist at the coalition, words that I at one point never thought I would say, to talk about the coalition's first ever legislative priority. It is a bill that we are developing based on your information to us about what it means for the DSHS offices to effectively still be closed after 21 months to way too many people. So I think I'll turn it to Sarah and then Melanie. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I know I've been working with many of you on this call over the last 6 months as we have tried to do advocacy to get the DSHS offices to not just reopen in a limited capacity, but to reopen so that the offices are accessible to anyone that needs to walk in and receive in-person services. Our advocacy has also focused on the DSHS call center. In the offices being closed, clearly everything shifted to online and the call center. And what we are hearing from both clients and service providers on the ground is that the wait times on the call center can be 2 to 3 hours. And in the last couple of months, there has been a huge increase in dropped calls. So not uncommon for someone to wait 1 to 3 hours and then have the call dropped from the queue. Our advocacy over these last few months has brought a lot of attention to this issue. We have heard from providers all across the state. While we are a King County based organization, this is by far a statewide issue, and it affects people in the state very differently. I heard from a provider in Mattawa. For those of you who don't know, I had to look at a map to see where it was. It is in central Washington, outside of Yakima. Their experience is very different. They are 60 miles from a DSHS office. So what their clients really need is an accessible call center. And what they're finding is that clients don't have enough minutes on their cell phones. Some people don't have the ability to charge their cell phones. So they're coming into social service offices and medical providers' offices to be able to call DSHS. So we are shifting our strategy a little bit to bring this issue even higher. And as Allison said, the coalition is running our first ever legislation at the state legislature. And I'm going to turn it over to Melanie Smith, our lobbyist, to talk a little bit about what this legislation is going to entail. And really kind of what our goal is.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sarah and Allison. And really, I want to thank all of the presenters today. I have taken a bunch of notes. I've learned a lot. My name is Melanie Smith. As mentioned, I am a contract lobbyist, and I'm super honored to be the contract lobbyist for the coalition. So as Sarah mentioned, we've been trying for many, many months to work with the department and figuring out a more equitable way to essentially restore the services that people had access to before the pandemic. And there are lots of reasons why I think those conversations have been stalled out. And so a few weeks ago, I think we just decided that we had to sort of take this to a higher authority, which in this case is the legislature, right? And I think that it's fair to take this to the legislature because, the state is the one that creates a lot of the mandates for clients that caseworkers and DSHS is needed to help clients overcome, right? They've created in some cases unnecessary barriers, but that's conversation maybe for another time, that then clients have to navigate, and clients have to navigate all of these barriers. And that can be really hard to do if you don't have access to the technology that is required to interact with DSHS. So all of that is to say, we are in the process of prepping a piece of legislation that I'm hoping will start a conversation about what are the minimal expectations from DSHS to serve clients, right? Today's DSHS in the state has a responsibility to make sure that all of the people who need services can access services. And that starts with eligibility. That's like the basic. I have told so many people something that I heard over the summer, which is at some point a provider just stopped even trying to get people to qualify for ABD. And that broke my heart. And it should break legislators' hearts, because they should understand that when nonprofit service providers can't even recommend people apply for a program because the application process is too onerous to do in a virtual setting, that is heartbreaking. So we have a bill. It's not yet done. We're still figuring out the nuances of this. We're still doing all of the work to find a bill sponsor and get it on the committee calendar. I think that there will be significant updates about this over the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned. I think by the next time this group meets in a month, so many details will be ironed out. But I do want to implore you to really think about stories that you have. Sarah has been collecting stories. I got a rush meeting with a legislator, basically on the power of your sign-on letter. So I sent him an email and said, this is the problem, and here's the sign-on letter. And the 60+ organizations that were listed on that letter got his attention enough that I got in a pretty rush basis, which if any of you have ever tried to get into a calendar of a busy legislator at the last minute, is really a challenge. So they prioritized a meeting with me, I think, based on the strength of the group of people that signed on to that letter. So be thinking about stories, be thinking about ways that you've had clients impacted. There's going to be a lot of attention and a lot of desire on the part of this legislature to, build back better. And what we have to make sure is that when they're building back better, they don't ignore the better that they had before, right? It is not enough when DSHS says, oh, but 85% of people have better experiences interacting with DSHS in a virtual environment. That is not sufficient. I mean, to just erase the other 15% who are having worse experiences, it's not acceptable. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the legislative process or where we sort of go from here. More details to follow, but I just want to thank you in advance. This is going to take all of us a lot of effort. I don't think I've ever seen a state agency. I've never tried to hold a state agency accountable in the way that we're about to. So this is not a minor, it's a short bill, but it will be a major policy shift to talk about what the obligations of the state are to the recipients of the benefits that the state is offering. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Melanie. We'll give people a second to think about what questions they might have. I want to say one of the reasons that we're so happy that we are connected with Melanie. Last legislative session, we contracted with Melanie saying, we just want to dip our toe in the water and see what it's like to have a contract lobbyist, because we have over the years gotten more and more involved in our advocacy, which includes, I want to say, the fact that we even have the HEN and ABD programs, limited and inadequate as they are. The first time that this coalition got so deeply involved in state legislative advocacy was back when what was then called GAU, General Assistance for the Unemployable, was being eliminated in then Governor Gregoire's budget. And the statewide Coalition for the Homeless, which no longer exists as a separate entity, but was folded into the Housing Alliance, didn't put that on their priority agenda. And coalition member organizations and service providers said, the Coalition on Homelessness for King County needs to step up. This is a priority issue, and we're just not satisfied that our statewide partner organization isn't pressing on it. So we pressed on it. We got the Disability Lifeline, and then that evaporated and transformed into HAN and ABD, and we're still pushing to make those actually serve people. But when Melanie, and Sarah and I had a meeting some time ago, I hope it's okay to say this, Melanie, but she said, okay, we've had these meetings, we've sent these letters, we've had more meetings, we've sent more letters. This might be a crazy idea, but what do you think about the possibility of running a bill? And we really took some time to think about it and to talk with our members and partners. This is not a decision that we take lightly. I try to hold the line that we are the Seattle-King County Coalition on Homelessness, and we have wonderful statewide partner entities. But the short version, I think it's fair to say, is it wasn't a crazy idea. It is a necessity. Our statewide partners are fully booked doing, as you just heard, some incredibly important, massive heavy lifting already. And we have an obligation. We are the biggest county. We are the biggest independent homeless coalition. We have the most people experiencing homelessness. And we have, thanks to you all and your membership dues, the capacity to do what we're doing. I'll be honest with you, it's a little bit freaky, but I have every confidence. In addition to Melanie's experience and skill, Sarah is an incredible advocate and a public benefits attorney. And you all have the stories, you have the experiences. So I want you to really think deeply, not only as service providers, but as advocates. What are the ways that you can invite the people whom you are working with, whose experiences are firsthand, to inform this advocacy? This could potentially be a great opportunity for somebody who might be shy, who might not make it all the way to Olympia, to, with your support and with our support and with support from Poverty Action, put together a 1 to 2 minute statement that they could read on video to state lawmakers so that they hear firsthand what it's like to not have minutes on your phone and to not be able to get in person during the open hours to the DSHS office to get what you are entitled to. That's what we're asking you to do. And Melanie and Sarah will do the other heavy lifting parts. It's also a wonderful opportunity for us to partner with folks who are primarily focused on disability rights work, as well as public health issues, and our statewide partners serving folks experiencing homelessness. So it's more of the relationship and connection building, even during COVID. That's our strength. That's the secret sauce. Leanna, would you like to just unmute and add your little comment there? Because I think it's great for folks to hear from you.
Yes, happy to. Just want to piggyback on what Allison said. It's so important for lawmakers, policymakers to hear from the folks who are impacted by the policies that they're working on. And truly that firsthand experience, firsthand expertise really makes all the difference in making sure that things get passed and make sure that positive progress is made. So I know it's such an intimidating process. It was only my first time, maybe 2 years ago, doing anything regarding the legislature. And careful, because you'll just get caught right on and you're going to want to keep on doing it. But I know that first time can be really intimidating. So if you're interested in sharing your story and you want to just be a little coach through it, or if you're like, is this how it's done? Any questions that you have and you want to support this effort, I'm happy to help out. I just dropped my email in the chat. So don't be shy, reach out to me, and I'm happy to work with you on this.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you. Thanks, Leanna. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you so much for what you're already doing and what you're about to do. We salute you. We know that your time is going to be unpredictable, but we of course will welcome you to our meetings in January, February, March as you're able, and we'll interpolate as necessary. I know that the work of finding a bill sponsor is well underway, so we're eager to be able to share more with you all, and we'll do that as soon as Melanie lets us know. And I think we're running a little bit behind, so I think I might just say the following. While we haven't introduced legislation at the state level before, we have done it at the local level, and we do know how to advocate, and you all know how to advocate. And Nancy Amadei is here, so we will just borrow our very favorite Nancy Amadei quote of all time, that advocacy just means speaking up. And our job is to make it easy for you and the folks you work with to speak up. Our voices collectively are powerful, but only if we use them. You heard Representative Macri say something that's really true. Her door and the door of every other elected official in the state legislature, even though it's a virtual door right now, is being knocked on morning, noon, and night by people who are paid to lobby for other interests. And in some cases, those are interests that are frankly counter to those of our people. Nigel Herbig is here, former longtime legislative aide in Olympia, who might share his perspective at some point. And Nigel is here now in his new role at the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, so we might tap your Olympia knowledge, Nigel. But what I'm going to do right now is share a slide that that Maggie Malone, who is out sick today, but did a great job on prepared, just based on the first 75 people to register for this meeting. You know, one thing we've noticed is that meeting attendance, not too surprisingly, is a little bit lower than the number of people who registered. And we get that. It's December, it's month 21 of a damn pandemic. And we are happy that we are recording this, so it will be on our YouTube channel and you can share it with folks who might have missed the meeting. But we took the first 75 of over 100 folks who registered for this meeting. And I think Jody or Sarah is maybe pulling up the slide to share with you, just so that you can see some of the, thank you so much, some of the legislative districts. Not too surprisingly, the 43rd is pretty big, but and obviously we are going to see new maps in the near future, but you can already see we have people who are active in this coalition who don't even live in King County. Their home addresses are in other counties, and that is awesome. I mean, it might not make for a great commute, but what it is that we are in fact able to connect with lawmakers who represent not just King County and who represent folks in, I think we did this last session. I think we have people who participate in our advocacy in something like 40 different legislative districts. And that's great, because you can't just pass legislation when Representative Nicole Macri and other people in the 43rd, now 46th district are supporting it. So thank you so much for sharing that map. It's just a little way to visualize what's going on. And those of you who remember our in-person meetings, remember that we actually had a physical map and we had people put little dots on the map to represent what districts you're in. So please do the following. I know this is kind of hokey, but pull out your phone and get ready to put a phone number in. I've entered this phone number in my phone under Olympia. This is our state legislative hotline. Nancy, we're going to tap you to do this with us at a future meeting, but yes, I won't do it without forewarning you. But here is the number, and if you know the number, you can unmute and recite it with me. It is 1-800. Go on, Karina.
562-6000.
Great. One more time for the peanut gallery.
1-800-562-6000.
Thank you so much. We really, we use that number in part because it's one number, and you can get a message to all three lawmakers and to the governor, in part because it's low tech and pretty easy to use. And in part because we want people to understand that their voices aren't going into a vacuum. And the legislative hotline is actually staffed by real people who answer that phone number and take a short dictated message And you don't have to know what district you're in. You can just give them your name and your address and they will look them up for you. Nigel, thank you so much for saying there are more sophisticated ways to go, and we encourage those. It's actually pretty good reminder to all of you. We usually teach our Advocacy 101 workshops throughout the legislative session. We're trying to figure out what's going to be workable, and so please tell us what you think would be useful. But we have lots of tips and tools. We have people like Nigel, Nancy, Melanie, Karina, folks who've done this and who've thought about this, who can share their own tips. One of the things that we've done in the past, I didn't think of this, but a long ago, outreach worker did this. He organized a pizza party for the folks whom he works with, and they partnered with Angeline's Gay Center across the street, and they just got everybody pizza and taught them about the legislative hotline number and let folks use their phones, and that was awesome. We've also done Mad Lib scripts to make it easier for people who might feel intimidated to just sort of have a few little words written out for them. And we are thinking about just doing a drop-in over the lunch hour so that people can share information, action alerts, tips, what you've found to be effective, and ask your questions. Just something informal, drop in, but to help you do what we are asking you to commit to, which is to pledge to take action every single week. This is a short legislative session, 60 days, and every single week things are moving through the legislative process. You don't need to know every step of the way. What you need to know is whom to follow and whom to ask questions of, and you need to know that your voice matters multiple times in the process. And our job is to help make that easy. So thanks, Jody, for putting that up there. And I think maybe we'll just let folks know about our January membership meeting. And of course, the fact that we're going to have virtual advocacy days and opportunities for people to hear from other lawmakers. We're hoping, because the session is partly virtual, that it means that we'll have the opportunity to invite lawmakers throughout session, which is something that we would never be able to do otherwise. And I'll just stop there and say how grateful we are. I know this is longer than our usual meeting now, so I know some folks had to drop off, but oh, thank you so much, Sarah, for adding those lobby day dates in for people to note. Anything for the good of the order, please be sure to let us know. You can unmute and share it or put something in the chat. I hope that this succeeded in making you feel excited and not overwhelmed. If you feel like it's a lot to take in, it's true, but you don't need to keep all of it and in your head at one time. Just take little nibbles and we will help you get a full meal. Excited, good. Thank you, Naomi. We're working on getting our series of membership meetings up on the website, and then there's other stuff that's coming in the new year. Sarah and Jody are working on trainings for 2022, planning them out so that you'll have that information. And we want to also note and recognize that come March of 2022, we will be hitting 24 months of living through a pandemic while also living through other crises. And we want to find ways for people to reflect on the good and the bad and the lessons learned and the people lost and the progress made. So please join us in thinking about how we want to use that time in March together. And we'll probably go back to inviting some musicians to join us to give us all a little bit of musical strength and respite at the end of our meetings in 2022. So if you've got friends who are in the music world, feel free to introduce us to them, because we'd love to support them with a stipend and invite them to support us with their music.
Thanks, folks. The link to the January meeting is in the chat, and we'll send it out with all the notes afterwards.
Thank you so much, everybody.